Today I want to hit something I encounter quite a bit, and that is storage in various locations that really shouldn't have combustible storage. I want to go ahead and take a look at a couple locations identified within the International Fire Code and expand on that a little bit. If you take a look at Section 315 of the 2021 IFC International Fire Code, what it says is that combustible material shall not be stored in boiler rooms, mechanical rooms, electrical rooms, or in fire command centers as specified in Chapter 5. Think of server racks for communication rooms. Would those be construed as being electrical rooms? So I had to make calls on this. If you look at the commentary for this section, Chapter 3 of the IFC, what the commentary will tell you is that the intent is not necessarily for a combustible-free zone. Let's take, for an example, filters within a mechanical room. The commentary specifically says that it's okay to have boxes of filters, but the intent is so that first responding personnel, firefighters, can navigate through a mechanical room or an electrical room and find their way to shut off power or other utilities. I looked into this a little further. About 8 years ago, I wanted to understand this in terms of how the Idaho State Fire Marshal's Office interpreted this section. Because when I initially read that in the IFC, and I'd been debating this for a couple of years, how do I handle server rooms, things like that, I was all about just saying no more, thou shalt not do it. So I went on a couple tours with a deputy state fire marshal over my region, high schools, hospitals. And one thing that I picked up on is the gentleman I was with that was receiving his insights directly from the state fire marshal was that they really weren't 4-0 in terms of prohibiting all combustibles in such rooms. For instance, I went into a mechanical room. They had a couple reams of paper, for instance. And normally, if you look strictly at the verbiage of the code, that's a thou shalt not. The other thing I noticed was that there was a lot more lackadaisical attitude on the part of the state fire marshal's enforcement arm in terms of other things like, mop buckets, stuff like that. So it kind of sculpted my interpretation a little bit from that. So what I did in crafting a policy at my particular site where I am the HJ, I basically outlined that stuff, and of course using the commentary as a baseline. Mechanical room specifically are enumerated as saying, hey, look, you can have filters in these locations, it's not a problem. So what I did is I stated, look, if you have an electrical server room, you have parts storage in there, such as computer parts, not a problem to store them in there, but what you don't want to see, the expansion of combustible storage within such locations that then create a fire hazard or a tripping hazard for emergency responding personnel. One other thing that I wanted to look at that from the IFC is in terms of storage under stairways. If you look at the same section in Chapter 3, this is once again the 2021 International Fire Code, 315.3.4. It talks about concealed spaces used for storage of combustible materials, and they are required to have 1 hour fire resistance rated construction. If you go over to Chapter 10 and take a look at Section 10.011 for stairs, there's a section here that enclosures under interior stairways are prohibited from having any kind of combustible storage. So have you ever been into like a interior exit stairway enclosure? There's suppression under the stairways. And it's really kind of hard conveying directly from the code, am I allowed to have storage in those locations in an interior stairway enclosure? And I actually was concerned about this to the point that I actually talked to the former chairperson of the Society of Fire Protection Engineering. His name was Fred Maurer. And we chatted about this very subject. How do I interpret this? What do I do with interior stairway enclosures as far as storing miscellaneous items? Let's take mop buckets as an example, or a fiberglass ladder. Is that permissible? And depending on which AHJ you talk to, it's all different. This is, it's kind of focusing on the more edgy things in these videos. So Mr. Maurer, Dr. Maurer's conclusion was that no, you cannot do that. And I asked the same question of John Sherry. He was the former chairperson for the Assembly and Educational Occupancies for NFPA 101. And I believe I also asked Larry Wetzel. He's the former chairperson for NFPA 72 and 13. So some big names. And based on those, the direction I received from those experts, it's a no-go. John Sherry's statement was that, look, if you allow non-combustible storage in a stairway enclosure, what's going to happen is that's basically going to snowball and invite combustible items to be in there. But if you take a look at Chapter 10, let's actually read this section, 1011.7.3. The walls and soffits within enclosed usable spaces under enclosed and unenclosed stairways shall be protected by 1 hour fire resistance rated construction. Now there's some exceptions for R2s and R3s, but I basically made a policy. I had to make a policy at my site. The reservation that I manage is the authority having jurisdiction, saying thou shalt not have any storage under stairways, period. And that is both open and enclosed stairways. So I made that decision. A lot of people didn't like that, but I don't know where else to go with that. So I guess the gist of this whole video is, look, you can moderate a little bit based on commentary in terms of like a mechanical room or a server room. I've incorporated those modifications, allowing a little bit of combustible storage, so long as it does not impede firefighter response. And then as far as stairway enclosures, it's a thou shalt not. And as far as exterior stairways, that's specifically enumerated in the code as a thou shalt not. Basically, don't store anything with interior stairway enclosures unless it's protected by 1 hour construction. Hope this helps, satisfies some stuff. I know it's a question I hear occasionally, so I wanted to discuss this with you, maybe add some commentary that might help you in crafting your local policy. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.